And at the beginning of it all, a young woman named Kaori is impressed by the city's buildings and deduces that they are buildings constructed by royalty. However, a friend of hers, named Yuya, says that they are ordinary buildings, eliciting some laughter from the girl. Suddenly, some men notice that Yuya is the same boy who was with the model Mio, and they become envious to see him next to Kaori as well. Then, a runaway truck starts heading towards a girl. Yuri steps between the two to try to save the child, but in the end, she and the child are saved by Yuya. Upon getting up, Yuri says that they didn't need to worry so much about her. After all, Yuri considers that she is trained enough. As for Yuya, he introduces himself as a young man who went to a new world through a mysterious door. Having done that, Yuya reports that his life has completely changed for the better, since in that new world Yuya possesses superhuman abilities, something that greatly facilitates his life. Later, Yuya goes to the guild, where he finds a job investigating monsters in the outskirts of the royal capital. Upon reading about the mission, he approaches the receptionist to learn more about the task. Yuya discovers that the mission ends as soon as he manages to hunt any monster in the area. After leaving the guild, Yuya heads to the forest with Knight and Akatsuki, his two loyal battle allies. After facing numerous monsters in the forest, Yuya encounters a mysterious woman and extends his hand to her, believing her to be a random woman. The young woman speaks to him as if she has known him for a long time, and upon further reflection, Yuya finally remembers the girl. At that point, she tries to get closer to him and offers him a VIP treat as a way of thanking him for saving her. But seeing things heating up there, Yuya says she doesn't need to do that. Then another day, Yuri transfers to a new school, and the teacher asks her to introduce herself to her new friends, which she does. Although Yuri tries to have the charisma of a robot, everyone in the class immediately likes her, finding her very pretty. The teacher asks Yuri to sit at the back of the room, where there's an empty desk. As Yuri approaches, a girl named Haruna starts talking to her with a big smile, and Yuri, in turn, responds dryly as always. During class, Yuri starts sweating because, even though she understands Japanese with her language comprehension ability, she still finds the story very confusing. And then, in physics class, Yuri manages to perform better, humiliating all the other students in basketball. And after the game, Yuri goes to the locker room, where she is cheered by all the students on her team, because they believe they only won because she was on their team. But upon hearing this, Yuri decides to remain modest. Upstairs, she says that without the help of her friends, she wouldn't have achieved anything on her own. During the conversation, another girl named Natsumi starts talking to Yuri and then invites her to join the basketball club. But upon hearing this, Yuri is confused since her old school didn't have clubs. However, after understanding the concept of school clubs, Yuri expresses interest in the school's archery club. Continuing the conversation, Haruna asks where the girl lives. Yuri replies that she lives in the same house as Yuya, something that leaves all the girls astonished and staring at her with their mouths agape. As soon as they find out, the girls go to Yuya to confirm the information Yuri gave them, at which point the students around spit their coffee in Yuya's face, shocked by what they just heard. The next day, Yuri goes to the archery club, where she hears the story of an archer who ended up dead despite being trained by an excellent master. A group of beings known as Vis comment that the archer's power has completely disappeared, reinforcing the idea that he was killed by something or someone. The Vis deduce that this is the world's self-correcting mechanism, something rather problematic. One of the Vis says that the archer was probably weaker than they imagined. However, another Vil says that the man possessed the techniques of the divines, and therefore wouldn't discard that power willingly. Thinking about it this way, he deduces that the archer was defeated by one of the divines, or perhaps even erased by another entity. And reflecting further on how things are going, one of the vile ones notes a certain irony in that world. After all, the divine beings who aim to protect humans are increasingly siding with the Vile. Upon hearing this, one of the Viles begins to laugh, saying that the situation is becoming increasingly ridiculous for the human world. And although the divine beings are more friendly towards them, the Viles realize they need to be increasingly wary of the divine beings. After all, they have defeated the Viles several times. But upon hearing this, one of the Viles says that the destruction of their ancestors occurred long ago, when a very powerful man wiped out all the Viles. But currently, this powerful man no longer exists, which in turn makes the Viles feel safer. Upon hearing this, one of the villains becomes doubtful about what the others are doing, and then discovers that they are busy corrupting other divines, or meddling with the Dark Guild for pure amusement. This villain worries him, as he doesn't want to see his fellow villains doing anything too flashy, since it could influence the saints who haven't yet descended there. Meanwhile, Kaori talks to Yuya, saying it's fun to see Yuri enjoying her high school life. Hearing this, Yuya says he's also enjoying seeing Yuri happy, since she's in the club that suits her best, the school archery club. Regarding Yuri's archery background, Yuya says she was a disciple of a mentor. famously known as the Sacred Arch. And for due to numerous disagreements, Yuya recalls constantly clashing with Yuri, until suddenly, the people Yuri's mentor was protecting became hostages. On that occasion, the Sacred Arch was cornered by the villains, who gave her only two options. She had to choose between the death of the hostages or her own death. In the end, she accepted being killed by the humans to protect the people she loved. But what makes the situation worse is that the Sacred Arch was forced to witness the villains massacring humans right in front of her as she died. As for Yuri, she ended up inheriting the Saints' techniques, making her a rare being who isn't part of the Saints but can use the same powers as them. Therefore, Yuri becomes a potential victim of the villains, who could come to the human planet to take her away at any moment to use her powers. At this point, Usagi, a talking rabbit, advises Yuya to take good care of Yuri from now on, because she could be kidnapped without him even having a chance to stop it. After this conversation with Usagi, Yuya says that it was from that moment that he found himself involved in the battle between the Saints and the evils. At this point, Kaori notices the boy is very distant in his thoughts, and asks him how it's been living with Yuri these past few days. Hearing this, Yuya is at a loss for words, and only says that there's a huge cultural difference between them, something that confuses him a little sometimes. When he elaborates on her request, Yuya makes Kaori envious. After all, he feeds Yuri and even changes her clothes, something any student at their school would love to do. After the conversation, they decide to go for a walk, when suddenly they come across Lexia calling for help as she's being attacked by several monsters. Yuya rushes to the young woman's defense and takes down the monsters in the blink of an eye, thus saving her life. After that, Lexia approaches Kaori and starts staring at her as if she were going to fight, but suddenly her expression changes, and she asks Yuya to prepare the bathtub for her to bathe with Kaori. While in the bath, Lexia asks to know more about Kaori's true feelings, but upon hearing this vague question, Kaori is unsure what she's talking about. Lexia then decides to be as direct as possible and says that she's obviously talking about her feelings for Yuya. Meanwhile, Owen observes Yuya from afar and notices that he and Kaori have the same hair color, which means they are both nobles, or at least people close to royalty. Meanwhile, a country bumpkin from the countryside encounters a powerful opponent known as the Sacred Fist and questions him about why he possesses so much power. The Sacred Fist responds in the most obvious way possible, saying that he intends to become stronger and stronger, therefore it's natural that he craves even more power. Upon hearing this, the country bumpkin calls his opponent a traitor and then attacks him with his Sky Tear ability. But seeing the attack coming his way, the Sacred Fist manages to escape by hanging from a tree branch. There, he scorns the country bumpkin, saying that he has not honored his title of Sacred Axe. But soon after, the country bumpkin returns from the ashes, and so, he says that the Sacred Fist was too careless, and so the captain strikes him with the Heaven and Hell attack. After defeating the Sacred Fist, the country bumpkin notices that his enemy possessed the power of the Vial, something worrying, and that needs to be reported to the divine beings. But before he could leave and go warn the divine beings, the country bumpkin is struck from behind by the Sacred Fist itself, which hadn't died as expected. And after killing the country bumpkin, the Sacred Fist scorns the insignificant power of the divine beings, because now that it possesses the power of the Vial, killing a divine being is too easy, to the point that it can't even have a little fun. At that moment, the superior of the Sacred Fist appears to reprimand him, saying that he had already been warned not to act on his own. But upon hearing this, the Sacred Fist displays complete rebellion, saying that the power of the Vile Ones does not belong only to them. After all, this power is already fully diffused among the divine beings. Therefore, the Sacred Fist shouts at the Vile One, and says that he will not accept following anyone's orders. At that moment, the Vile One, superior to all, observes the Sacred Fist's rebellious behavior, and then realizes that he needs to get rid of him. Furthermore, the villain decides to use a new host capable of wielding the villain's power. Meanwhile, Yuya talks with his friends about that day's class, and everyone says they did well, which relieves Yuya, since he's always willing to help any student who needs remedial classes. But since everyone did well, he won't have to worry about it. Leaving school, he heads straight to the forest with Yuri. During the fight against a lucky rabbit, Yuri comments further on the old cell phone they're facing, saying it's a fantasy rabbit, the weakest monster in those dark regions. It's also known as a lucky rabbit because they're not easy to find. Yuya comments on the rabbit's maximization and minimization system and asks if the enemy can use it to alter its body size. Yuri replies that yes, but makes it clear that this is a skill that only serves to threaten and deceive the enemy. And although this is a dangerous skill in itself, Yuri says that the rabbit possesses two other even more frightening abilities: danger sense and emergency evasion. Continuing the explanation, Yuri says that the danger sense allows the rabbit to perceive practically any hostility coming its way, regardless of how serious or small the threat is. As for emergency evasion, conclusion, it's a skill used to teleport the rabbit to a safe place as soon as hostility is detected. Therefore, Yuri says that the only way to kill the rabbit is by eliminating the intention to kill, and thus, she finally manages to kill the rabbit. After returning home, Yuya gives Kaori the ring she took after the rabbit was defeated, and explains that the ring has the ability to transport her to a safe area as soon as she senses danger. And in this case, the spot he marked as a safe place was precisely her house. And as for the rabbit's cloak, Yuya says that as long as she wears it, Kaori will have her luck has increased. And well, after giving her the gifts, Yuya takes the girl to see the capital realm, and as soon as they arrive, Kaori starts looking at everything around her with a sparkle in her eyes, like a real child. Suddenly, Owen is surprised to see Yuya there, and asks what he's doing there. Yuya explains that he's in the city as a tourist, because he had promised to take Kaori to see a city in another world. As for Owen, he's relieved until he sees that Yuri is also there. Yuri makes it clear that she no longer has any interest in the first prince or that country, so she reassures him, saying that Owen doesn't need to worry about anything anymore, because now Yuri also aims to kill the Vials. Although Owen wants to arrest her, he decides to believe Yuya's word and says he won't do anything to the young woman. The two begin a conversation, during which Owen tells Yuya that a legendary dragon has awakened near the kingdom, and that this is the famous dragon that reigned during the creation of the world, making it the most special dragon of all. Upon hearing this, Yuya is too surprised to believe in this superstition. Owen confesses that it's all just speculation with some basis in fact. However, he says it's not entirely certain, as the guards have only received reports of a very loud bang, similar to that of a dragon. To get to the bottom of this story, Owen asks Yuya to help them investigate. As for Kaori, she says she'll go with Yuya too, because if something bad is about to happen to her, Kaori will be transported home immediately. In the forest, Yuya and the others take down the monsters one by one. Suddenly, Kaori approaches them and says she feels useless for not being able to help them in the fight. However, Yuya reassures her, saying she doesn't need to worry about anything because she also has her strengths. Moving on, Yuya informs them that they have just entered the canyon, one of the places they need to pass through to reach the location of the loud bang. They decide to take a break to eat something before continuing their journey. However, since Yuya isn't used to the local culture, she's a little hesitant to eat their food. But as soon as she tries it, she's pleasantly impressed, as she didn't expect such different food to be so good. But during the meal, they are interrupted by a very loud bang. Yuri notices that this is an unusual enough situation for them to be worried. As for Kaori, she is saved by Akatsuki, who then receives praise from Yuya for his good work. Meanwhile, everyone around the young man is astonished by the creature they see approaching them. Yuya, however, doesn't understand his friend's concern until he suddenly looks back and comes face to face with the famous legendary dragon. And out of nowhere, the creature begins to speak to them, calling them all insignificant humans. Hearing this, Yuya is surprised, as he never imagined it could talk. Then, the other legendary being explains that he is different from dragons. Conventional. After all, he is capable of speaking and fully understanding human language. And continuing the conversation, the legendary dragon states that the unpleasant smell of saints and vials were the causes that led him to awaken. Then, the dragon gets confused, saying that the smell of saints and villains is coming from there, when in reality he was smelling curry. And seeing that the dragon wants to try some human food, Yuya throws a pill to the dragon. And as soon as he eats it, the dragon shrinks in size, transforming into a baby dragon. And although he gets angry about this, the baby dragon takes the opportunity to attack an entire plate of curry. And after the meal, he is impressed with the human food, and furthermore, the baby dragon smells a different scent coming from Yuya's group. In Yuri's case, he says she smells of saints and villains at the same time. And as for Yuya, the dragon says he has the same scent as the sage, something that even surprises the legendary dragon. And seeing that the dragon knows the sage, Yuya explains that he has a connection to the other world. And as soon as he hears this, the legendary dragon says that he has never heard of anything like it, even though he has been alive since the time of creation. And returning to the subject of the wise man, the dragon says that he couldn't understand the wise man's suffering. After all, he doesn't have the concept of life expectancy ingrained in his mind, considering that the legendary dragon is immortal. Therefore, he thought that aging and dying were nothing more than mere foolishness. And well, after finishing eating, the dragon lies down on the ground with its belly up, completely satisfied with the human curry. At this point, Yuya takes advantage of the moment to check the creature's ability window, and then discovers that he managed to tame the legendary dragon out of the blue, something he didn't want to have done, since his intention there was only to investigate. As for the legendary dragon, it is equally upset, as it never expected to be tamed by a human. And since it has already been tamed, Yuya sees that there isn't much he can do about it, so he starts thinking of a name to give his new pet. After much thought, he arrives at the name Oma. The dragon approves the name, and then begins to analyze Yuya's other pets more closely, discovering that one of them is Knight, a rare black Fenrir. Even if its embryo wasn't present at the beginning of its creation, its combat power is equivalent to that of a legendary dragon, which in turn has enough power to destroy an entire planet. And well, going back to the king, they discover that the dragon tends to become more and more powerful as the years pass. Therefore, they cannot be responsible for the legendary dragon. The very next day, Yuri goes to the archery club to practice, until suddenly, she starts shooting nonstop. Her friends ask Yuri to stop for a moment, otherwise she'll end up destroying everything. And feeling a bit of this impulsiveness, Yuri deduces that this is the vile feeling that dwells within her. Then, an evil being inside Yuri says that the girlet's nearing its expiration date, and so, that creature inside her will finally be able to come out and do whatever it wants. The next day, Yuri says she's been feeling weak these past few days, so she decides to go train a little with Yuya. In the forest, Yuya finds the girl a little strange, and says that she shouldn't overexert herself if she's really feeling unwell. But upon hearing this, Yuri says it's the complete opposite. She feels much worse if she doesn't exercise. They remain silent until, suddenly, Yuri collapses to the ground in pain, leaving Yuya worried. He approaches her to see if she's alright, and then that being from before begins to speak through Yuri, saying that it has finally managed to get out. As soon as they hear this, Akatsuki and Knight begin to find the girl strange. The entity, in turn, says that Yuri was just a vessel she used to recover, therefore it's time to discard her, as was her initial plan. At that moment, the entity detaches itself from Yuri's body, and Yuya runs to catch her. Seeing this, the entity gets angry and attacks the boy, telling Yuya not to ignore her like that. Yuya manages to break free from the entity's attack and strikes back. The girl sees her hand is badly damaged and realizes she needs another host as soon as possible. But instead of just going after someone else, the entity decides to kill Yuri. Yuya then begins attacking the girl to protect his friend. During the fight, he offers himself as a new host for the entity, believing that this way Yuri will be safe. Upon hearing this, the entity immediately understands Yuya's plans and says that he will not be able to imprison her within his body as he is planning. Even after hearing this, Yuya remains still, waiting for her to use his body as a host. Then, the entity gains access to Yuya's body and says that after the man's heart is consumed by darkness, there's nothing he can do against her. But as soon as she tries to do this to him, the entity discovers that Yuya doesn't have even a drop of darkness in his heart to which she can cling. Returning to Yuya, he hears the entity's voice coming from somewhere and begins to look around. She says she's speaking directly from inside him, and noticing her in his stomach, Yuya hears the entity lamenting that she can't do anything with his heart. After all, he has no negative emotions within him. As for Yuri, she says that when she had the villain inside her, it constantly spoke to her, and the things the entity said were always the same. It commanded Yuri to take revenge on humans for her. Hearing this, Yuya starts to get annoyed and says that if these voices become constant in his head, he won't even be able to ignore them since they're directly in his head. Yuri then says that in her case, the entity managed to dominate her to the point that she also wanted to take revenge on humans, even though she didn't have any apparent hatred for them. And well, upon returning to Uma, Yuya greets him. As for the dragon, he notices that this time Yuki no longer has a scent of vile emanating from her. After all, now the smell is coming from Yuya, something that makes the dragon suspicious. Then, the entity is astonished to hear the legendary dragon's voice and learn that he is on the side of the humans when he should be with the vials. But upon hearing her say these strange things, Yuya is completely confused and says that he accidentally tamed the legendary dragon, therefore he is no longer to blame. The dragon corroborates what its master says, making it clear that if the entity tries anything against the people who live there, it should be prepared to suffer the consequences. As for Yuya, Uma tells him not to let himself be bewitched by the villain, because if that happens, he will end up dead. But at the same time, the dragon says that Yuya will become stronger if he manages to master the villain's power. Suddenly, Master Usagi appears and begins to insult Yuya, saying that he is a complete idiot for offering his body to a villain to inhabit. Having said that, Usagi reveals that he passed by there by chance. After all, he was going somewhere else, but he doesn't say where, as it's nothing that should worry Yuya and his group. Before leaving, he asks Yuya to continue striving for his best in training. Moving on, Usagi encounters Gilbert Fister, also known as the Sacred Fist. Meanwhile, Yuri is cooking something with Yuya when she suddenly hears something suspicious and decides to investigate. Yuya follows her, asking what's going on, as unlike her, he didn't see anything suspicious around the house. On the way, Yuri says she heard a loud noise coming from deep within the forest and deduces it must be the sound of combat. They continue towards the noise Yuri heard when they suddenly find Usagi wounded after a fight with Gilbert, the Sacred Fist. Yuya is enraged to see his master being struck by Gilbert, and a bit of darkness is unleashed in his heart. Upon seeing this, the entity trapped within decides to lend its power to Yuya, but in exchange, asks that he not be defeated. During the fight, Yuya manages to break the Sacred Fist's arm, causing him unimaginable pain. As for Yuri, she notices Yuya's somber expression and asks him to return to being the kind person he always was. However, Yuya says he prefers this new version of himself. After all, he won't achieve anything by being kind. Seeing that Yuya won't return to normal so easily, Uma makes Akatsuki take the pill to become larger, and then Akatsuki uses his ability on Yuya to comfort him, thus softening his heart. As for Usagi, he is also healed by Akatsuki's magic and takes advantage of his recovery to hunt down the Sacred Fist. But looking around, Yuri says that Gilbert has simply disappeared. Meanwhile, Gilbert, still injured, struggles to walk through the forest and promises that Yuya and his group will pay the price the next time they meet. But before he can escape, Uma finds him and says there won't be a second fight. He'll be eliminated right there and then. And in the world of the vials, they notice that the presence of Gilbert Fister, the Sacred Fist, has suddenly disappeared. And furthermore, they discover that the vial power that resided in Yuri's body also had its connection severed, and is no longer in Yuri's body, the disciple of the Sacred Bow. Upon hearing this, one of the vial beings says that this is a very unusual situation, because even though Yuri died in the most miserable way possible, the vial power should still be present. But what worries him most is the disappearance of Gilbert Fister. After all, he was considered a rare compatible host for the vial beings, making his loss unthinkable. Furthermore, the villain says he intended to settle things personally with the Holy Fist, but now that he's dead, that reckoning will never happen. At this, another villain says he should be grateful, as it will mean less work for him. And when discussing the saints, the villains explain that they are the race most compatible with villainous power. After all, few saints are capable of resisting their power. Regarding the supposed saint who killed Gilbert, the villain says that this saint is possibly the Holy Sword, which is the most powerful saint among humans. Feeling threatened by the saints, the villain suggests they declare war on the remaining saints. Hearing this, the villain beside him begins to jump for joy, but he is quickly restrained by the villain leader, as they will only kill the saints who refuse to join them, and those who do join will be used as slaves. However, what weighs most heavily on the villain's mind is the assassin of the Sacred Fist. After all, they need to discover which saint did this and eliminate him immediately, because in this way, they will get rid of a great threat. My friends, it's getting crazier and crazier, right? If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe so you'll be notified when new videos come out, and comment below part 2. See you in the next anime, friends.